Hello, Jeremiah. We have you. Sorry about that.
That's all right. I wasn't sure if I was working right or not.
Go ahead and start when you're ready.
Okay. I guess just a real brief introduction to how I came across this story. Jill had asked me to share a story with you all. Um, and I guess in my mind I was thinking about where I picked and how I picked this story. So I wanted to share that with all of you guys. I guess consider the source. Um, and for me, it was in 1996. In the summer of '95, I had attended a traditional Blackfeet ceremony called the Medicine Lodge. Um, and then in the winter or spring of '96, I was attending a Stone Child Community College, and we went to a learning conference called the AHEC, American Education Higher Education Consortium, and I presented a serious oral interpretation speech there. And I selected this story called "The First Medicine Lodge" that I had discovered in a book written by an author, George Bird Grinnell. The book was entitled Blackfeet Lodge Tales, I believe is the name of the book. So I just wanted to give a shout out to Grinnell. I also wanted to give a shout out to uh, obviously my ancestors of my Blackfeet heritage for sharing this story with Grinnell and him being there to record it. Uh, and so this past week I was kind of trying to revisit that story and thinking where I had why I had selected to edit some of the parts for time because of the presentation I had made. Um, well, you guys can go ahead and look at that story and compare it. In my revisiting of this story, I realized that my version has some little bit of discrepancies from the book, but the details are all pretty much the same. Um, so I guess I'll just peel into the story. Uh, a great many winters ago, or a great many years ago, the Blackfeet were living a peaceful lifestyle. There weren't any wars. They didn't fight with neighboring tribes back then. Um, and there was a head chief who had a beautiful daughter. The the chief's daughter was so beautiful that many young men had approached her and asked to marry her, but she had turned all of these matrimonial requests down. And it got to a point where the chief started to become concerned that he wouldn't be able to marry his daughter off. So he asked her why, and her response to him was that she had promised herself to a sky being. In this in the same camp, then there was also a young boy who was orphaned and often ridiculed because of his appearance. He had been born encumbered with a scar across his face, and so he was often ridiculed and called Scarface because of that, his appearance. The orphan boy lived in the lodge of his grandmother, and it was often, like I say, it was often the point of ridicule by other boys, and they were teasing him one day, and they told him he should go ask that beautiful young chief's daughter to marry him. Now he came and mustered all of his courage, and he asked the young lady when she went to gather water one day. He saw her approaching, and he asked her to marry him, and she said that she would marry him, but he would have to get permission from the sun, that he would have to remove that great scar from his face, and then she would know that he had talked to the sun and had permission to do so. So at the first part of what she was saying, he was delighted. But then the rest of what she said sunk in, and he realized that he was going to have to try to seek out the sun's lodge. So he started to inquire, and nobody seemed to know how to help him find the lodge of the sun. He told his grandmother he was going to go on a journey, and if she would help him to get him some moccasins and some food stores for his long trail. He took off on his journey and headed towards the west, and he camped on a butte that first night, made himself a bed of stones, and he wept and he prayed. And just before the sun rose that night, a voice came to him, and it told him not to give up, to keep going on his journey. And he kept endeavoring, and he came across on his trail, he came across some different animals, and he would ask them if they knew where he could find the lodge of the sun. The first one he came across was a wolf on the prairie, and the wolf said that he didn't know where he would end up going, and that he knew that the sun didn't live on the prairie or in between the prairie and the forest. Maybe he should try to ask the grizzly bear, the wolf suggested. And ever westward, he's continuing on his journey, and each night he continues to make this bed of stones and weep and pray. And every dawn, just before the sun rises, a voice tells him not to give up and to keep going. And so he does. He finds the bear, and the bear cannot help. The bear explains that he's been to the top of the mountain and the edge of the forest and plains, and that the sun's lodge is nowhere in those places. And maybe he should ask the badger, the bear suggests. And when he comes across the badger, then the badger explains that he doesn't get very far from his hole in the ground, and that he doesn't know where he's gonna find this lodge of the sun at. Ever westward, Scarface has continued the journey, and he now finds himself on the edge of a great water that's so vast he can't see the other shoreline. And at this point, he's devastated. He's traveled so far and gone so long that he can't see himself continuing to get across this great water, and he almost gives up. He starts to cry, and he hears a voice that asks him why at the end of such a long journey would someone be so sad. And he opens his eyes and he sees that there's a crane there. And the crane, once he finds out what Scarface's intentions are, he says, well, I think I know somebody that can help. And he instructs Scarface to wait and bring that somebody back to help. The crane holds true to his word, and he brings back with him the chief of the crane people. And the chief of the crane people is willing to help Scarface to get to the lodge of the sun. He tells him that it's a dangerous journey, and that he'll have to close his eyes. So as the sun sets across the edge of the great water, then Scarface mounts onto the backs of the two cranes, and they ascend into the sky country where the sun's lodge is on the rays of the setting sun. When Scarface is told that it's safe to open his eyes, he does so, and he finds himself in an unrecognizable place. The cranes tell him to follow the trail that they've led him to, and that will lead him to the path of the sun. Not very far down the trail, Scarface comes across some fine clothing and a bow and arrow. A bow that's really, really fancy, and the arrow and quivers are straight, and This is really really nice stuff that someone must be missing. So Scarface leaves it alone, and he gets a little farther down the trail, and he comes across a strikingly handsome young man who's looking for his things that Scarface tells him where they are and that he had left them alone because he knew someone would be missing them. And the young man tells Scarface after this that he is the morning star, and that the sun is his father and the moon is his mother. And since Scarface is looking for the lodge of the sun, he will take him there because he's a good-hearted young man who doesn't touch other people's things. The morning star takes Scarface to the lodge of the sun, and the moon welcomes him, greets him kindly, and gives him some food to eat. When the sun gets home that day, he knows someone is in his lodge, and he knows why he's there. And he explains to Scarface that he's going to help him. He's going to allow him to marry that young girl. But he wants him in return to do something in exchange. He wants him to take this ceremony back to his people. The sun explains that if the people continue to practice this ceremony in the future, they will not have suffering or sickness. If they fulfill these promises to the sun, then their people will live long lives, have good health. So then he stays there and learns these many strange things from the sun. For quite a while he stays there. The time comes when Scarface grows lonely and he wishes to return to his camp of his people. That's when the sun instructs the moon to cover Scarface with white buffalo robes. She does so, and before he comes out from under the robes, the moon paints his face. After he comes out from under the robes, they wipe the paint off. The moon covers Scarface 3 more times. So each time he comes out from underneath the robes, a portion of the scar is removed with the paint. Now Scarface is identical to the fine, handsome young man Morningstar. So identical that when the moon presents the 2 young boys before the sun and asks the sun to choose his own child, he mistakenly chooses Scarface for his own. The sun instructs Scarface to close his eyes, and when he opens them, he finds himself camped right there where he'd made his first camp on that butte not far from his people's village. When he returns to the people in the camp, they're all excited to hear the story of where he has been and what he has learned. And right away, they get ready in preparation for that first medicine lodge. Scarface lives to be a wise old man. He has many children who have many grandchildren. He gets to marry that chief's daughter, and she becomes the first medicine woman for sponsoring that medicine lodge. When Scarface dies, he returns to the Sky Country, and he can be seen in the dawnscape as the false morning star. So that is my adaptation of George Bird Grinnell's adaptation of the Blackfeet First Medicine Lodge. And thank you for the time and allowing me to share it with you all.
Thank you, Jeremy. so much for your story. I do have a question here. When you talked about this Scarface receiving instructions from the sun, are there more stories in the Blackfoot tribe about the lessons and the teachings that Scarface got from the sun? Or was it that he brought the sweat lodge and the Sundance down, and that's what he learned from the sun?
There are a lot more, not so much stories, I guess, Jill. It's more like practical instruction. Um, kind of like what Delmar was talking about when he says, well, you're learning, but it's not always somebody specifically telling you, oh, you're learning this because of that. So a lot of times, like for myself anyway, then it's been that I've experienced something, I've participated in something, and I don't really know why until way later. So yes, there are more, I guess, teachings, but they're not necessarily written down, and you don't always know why until you've actually experienced it yourself.
Great, thank you. There's another question here. It says, are the stories that are passed down intended to have deeper meanings and interpretations over time?
Absolutely, absolutely. And that, I guess, I could kind of bounce off of what the last speaker was saying when he said it's a snapshot in time. You know, it means something different to each listener in that particular moment of time. You know, you may hear the story at age 5, and I'm sure it could be interpreted by the same listener at age 25 and then again at age 65 and have different meaning each time.
Thank you. Are there any more questions before we move on? I'm looking, just a moment, Jeremiah. How much do you think that the stories change over time, Jeremiah? If they're passed down in oral tradition, is there an expected amount of change that takes place over time, or is the original story held on to sacredly as very specific?
I would say that they change quite a bit over time. Just thinking about, excuse me, too much coffee. Just thinking about the research I've done in the last week, trying to remember where I picked this story from. I came across 3 different versions of the same story written down, and then realized, oh crap, my version is different from all 3 of these. So then I had to think of influences, I guess. Those influences surrounding us right then are also going to lead to that change or that adaptation in the story. I would say the main points, the real main focuses of the story are going to be there, but some of the subtle little details might evolve to something different that's more pertinent to the people hearing or telling the story at that time.
Okay, thank you. Oh, it looks like we got one more. I was going to stop. It says, how important is it that everyone accept the same interpretation of the story? It seems like a remarkably flexible tale.
So that, I think that's kind of what I was just saying initially, is that it means something different to every listener, and it probably means something different to every teller. So I would say that it's probably more important to have your own interpretation rather than a universal one. At least that's my interpretation of it.
Okay. Thank you so much for speaking today, Jeremiah. I really appreciate it.
Yeah,
Next.
you guys are all welcome. Thanks for having me. It's been a privilege and an honor to share this story with you all.
Thank you, Jeremiah.